It's funny how life gives you a perfect snapshot of what's coming. A clear, sharp warning that you're about to step into a total mess. For us, it was a call from the local precinct dispatcher at 7:15 in the morning, while my wife, Val, was still brushing her teeth. The second sign, of course, was that the call was about her. "Ma'am," the voice on the other end, sounding like he hadn't finished his coffee and was terrified, said with that tight, panicked professionalism only a rookie can muster. "We've received a 911 report that a woman is unlawfully occupying a residence at Oak Haven Ridge Community, refusing to vacate. The complainant is requesting immediate removal." Valerie, or Val as I call her, froze mid-brush, head tilted toward me, eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and, honestly, pure amusement. Toothpaste was still foaming at the corner of her mouth, which, trust me, only made the situation better. "Honey," she mumbled around the toothbrush. "Apparently I'm illegally living in our own house." I blinked. Still half asleep. "Did you forget to pay yourself rent again?" The rookie continued, oblivious. Complainant identified the subject as Valerie Vance. Val spat perfectly into the sink, the chuckle starting low in her chest. "Did she just try to evict the director of the State Judicial Security Unit?" There was a silence on the line so thick you could carve it. Then a barely audible whisper, "Wait, what?" But the damage, as we would soon learn, was already done. Cynthia Thorne had made the call. Cynthia Thorne, the self-appointed high priestess of the Oak Haven HOA, whose hobbies included timing sprinkler cycles with a stopwatch and issuing official warnings for improperly shaded window boxes. Cynthia had just dialed 911 and reported my wife, the highest-ranking judicial security officer in the entire state, as an intruder, and she had absolutely no clue what kind of tactical lightning strike she had just triggered. It all started 3 days earlier. We had decided to take a much-needed break from the city noise and the relentless stress of Val's job. Our cabin was our sanctuary, tucked deep into a patch of old pines with a private floating dock, and enough acreage between the properties that you could finally exhale without violating some obscure HOA clause. We bought the place last year after Val got her promotion, specifically because we needed somewhere to breathe, where no one called her director and nobody cared about who ran what. Or so we thought. The trouble naturally began before the groceries were even out of the trunk. A pristine white German SUV pulled into our gravel drive, uninvited. Out stepped Cynthia, wearing sunglasses large enough to land a small plane on in the kind of tailored linen that screams, "I have too much time and your problems are my hobby." She held a clipboard, like it was a sacred shield, and immediately began circling our patio, moving with the measured focus of someone mapping out a future legal dispute. She didn't offer a hello. "We've had some unauthorized residency activity on this parcel recently," she stated, never once looking up from her inspection. "Are you renters?" Val set down a 12-pack of paper towels, wiped her hands on her shorts, and gave her a perfectly measured smile. "No, we own this place." Cynthia stopped dead in her tracks, narrowing her eyes like she was checking a receipt. "I don't recognize you." "We were here last spring," Val said, remaining impossibly calm. "I'm Val. This is my husband, Alex." Cynthia's eyebrows practically kissed her hairline. "Well, I'm the HOA president, and we do require formal occupancy notices. Did you submit one through the resident portal?" I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. The resident portal she referred to was a notoriously buggy, glorified WordPress site with a broken calendar and a login form that required a doctoral degree to navigate. Val, to her eternal credit, didn't flinch. "We weren't informed that was necessary for owners." "Regardless," Cynthia insisted, crossing her arms over her chest as if protecting an invisible vault. "I don't see your name on the ownership record." That's when I finally got it. My name was the only one on the title because we'd purchased the cabin under my consulting LLC for some arcane tax structuring that my accountant insists upon. Val's name wasn't explicitly listed on the deed, but she was my wife, a co-owner in every legal and moral sense of the word. Cynthia didn't care about legality. She cared about finding the hook to exert control. She issued Val a printed warning of non-compliance in Comic Sans. If you can believe the audacity, and told my wife she needed to vacate until her residency could be properly verified. Val simply smiled, took the paper, and slowly tore it in half. "No thanks, Cynthia. I don't take orders from you." That was the official opening salvo of the war. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in petty, passive-aggressive terror. First, it was the pine debris infraction. She claimed our small pile of dropped needles violated the community's natural aesthetic limit. Then came the notes about excessive outdoor leisure, a term she invented to describe Val sipping coffee on the swing. The grand finale was the official formal complaint taped to our mailbox with packing tape and sealed with what appeared to be a lipstick mark. Val read it aloud, deadpan over breakfast. "To whom it may concern, the unidentified female on premises must depart within 48 hours or face removal via local enforcement. Signed, HOA President Cynthia Thorne, CPS. P.S. The community prefers lighter tones for patio cushions." I thought it was a joke. Val knew better. "This woman won't stop, Alex," she murmured, looking out the window at the ridgeline. "She's going to escalate until she feels powerful again." She wasn't wrong. When that 911 call came the next morning, we weren't shocked. Amused? Absolutely. Shocked? Not even close. What we didn't anticipate was her sheer speed. 15 minutes later, I was peering through the kitchen window as two police cruisers, not local PD, but county sheriffs, crept up our dirt road. Val, still glowing from her morning shower, opened the front door just as the lead officer raised his hand to knock. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice smooth, calm, and utterly in control, "I understand you're here to remove me from my own cabin." The older officer, Sergeant Hayes, I think, blinked, recognizing the name on the complaint but not the face. "Ma'am, we received a 911 report claiming someone was trespassing here, specifically a Valerie Vance." Val nodded. "That would be me. And as it happens, I'm also the one who signs off on your department's judicial security protocols and liaises with the state prosecutor's office." Both officers went ramrod straight, like two new recruits caught sleeping in formation. Hayes pulled his hat off, a sign of instant deference. "Director Vance." "We didn't realize." Val motioned them inside. "Let me save you the paperwork." The next 10 minutes were Val at her finest. A master class in using pure, cold evidence to dismantle a fragile lie. She didn't yell, she didn't threaten. She calmly pulled up the LLC documentation, showed them our marriage certificate on her phone, and then, the pièce de résistance, she brought up the security camera footage from the previous week. There it was. Clear as day. Cynthia Thorne, trespassing on our property twice. Once to photograph our recycling bin, once to measure our firewood stack with a tiny, ridiculous measuring tape. The officers exchanged glances. Hayes sighed. "Well, Director, we'll write this up as a false report. Looks like you've got enough here to press criminal harassment charges if you want to." Val tapped the screen and gave them a tiny, tactical smile. "Let's hold off for now, but flag this address. I want a formal, logged record of every single time she contacts this department again. Everything is documented now." They nodded, thanked her, and left without incident. Cynthia, of course, wasn't done. Not even close. Later that evening, we found her SUV parked half a block down, facing our house, engine running, windows down. I could only imagine she was desperately trying to call the HOA board. Or, worse, some cut-rate lawyer. Val leaned on the porch railing and watched her. A predator eyeing an easily spooked but highly persistent rodent. "She's going to try something bigger," Val murmured. "Next time, she won't just call local deputies." I glanced at her, frowning. "Then what do we do?" Val didn't look away from the parked SUV. We let her. We let her go as far as she wants. And then, she smiled. A thin, chilling smile that promised inevitable destruction. "I'll show her what the full weight of the state looks like when it lands on someone like her." I realized something then. Cynthia thought she was battling a bored housewife on vacation. She had just declared war on a woman who had personally helped take down state-level corruption rings, exposed corrupt officials, and had the governor's direct line saved under a private alias. The next few days were relentless. Cynthia activated the full HOA board, sending out a flurry of frantic emails accusing Val of being a threat to community security. claiming she had verbally threatened Cynthia, refused inspection access, and parked illegally on our own gravel. It culminated in a special HOA session at the clubhouse, a hideous building that looked like a poorly designed dental office. Val insisted on going alone. I waited in the truck, window rolled down, and soon enough, I heard Cynthia's voice from across the lot, shrill and confident. She refuses to acknowledge our authority. She won't comply with our standards, and frankly, I don't feel safe with her presence. Then the calm, cool steel of Val's voice cut through the noise. "If I may," she said, her tone dangerously even. "Not only am I married to the legal owner, but I'm also fully registered with the Secretary of State's office as co-executive on the LLC that holds the property. I am also, though I genuinely hate to keep bringing this up, the current director of our state's Judicial Security Unit." Silence. Just the buzz of the fluorescent lights. "Kerren," Val continued, turning the knife, "the only reason this hasn't gone legal is because I assumed you were smart enough to stop. But you've doubled down. You've tried to use legal processes to remove a lawfully present citizen based on nothing more than personal bias and a bruised ego." Her voice turned sharp for the kill. "If that's the tone of this HOA, I will file a state investigation into procedural abuse and community governance overreach before dinner." The room went utterly silent. You could hear a pin drop, or maybe a single fragile ego shattering. Val emerged 20 minutes later, calm, composed, but with that flicker of cold fire still in her eyes. The board hadn't voted. They were too terrified to do anything but postpone the issue. "They're giving her rope," Val said, buckling into the truck. "You think she'll hang herself with it?" I asked. Val turned to me, dead serious. "No, I think she's going to try and drag me with her when she jumps." That week, the harassment crossed the final, unforgivable line, the break-in. We came back from dinner, and the front door was slightly ajar. Nothing was stolen, but a framed photo of us was face down, and the drawer where Val kept her off-duty badge was pulled halfway out. Cynthia had used a copied master key she was unauthorized to possess. Val didn't speak. She just opened her phone, tapped once, and said, "Activate incident report. Code red, intrusion, civil escalation suspected. Secure location." She crossed the line, Val stated simply. Within hours, Val had filed 6 meticulously detailed complaints. Not one was emotional. Each was tied to a specific statute: criminal trespass, impersonation of authority, misuse of HOA master keys, repeated nuisance calls to law enforcement. She cited statutes, cross-referenced footage, attached evidence with timestamps, and included a summary prepared like a court briefing. It was like watching a tactical missile being programmed in real time. An hour later, Cynthia showed up with her sad, pale paralegal. Stephen. Val was waiting on the porch. "This is her," Cynthia hissed to the paralegal. "The woman I told you about. She's impersonating a resident and making threats." Stephen stepped forward, unfolding a document. "I'm here on behalf of the HOA's legal advisory team. We've drawn up a cease and desist order regarding your conduct." Val raised one hand, not high, just enough to stop him cold. "Stephen, is it? Let me stop you right there. First, I've already filed formal complaints about your client, including criminal trespass and unlawful surveillance. Second, this property falls outside the enforcement reach of the HOA bylaws due to its LLC status. As verified this morning. Third," Val leaned in, her voice now a low, dangerous growl, "I am Director Valerie Vance of the State Judicial Security Unit. So, unless you've got a court order signed by a real judge, anything you try to hand me is just stationery with very bad intentions." Stephen looked like a man who just realized he brought a toothpick to a gunfight. Val fixed her gaze on Cynthia. "You broke into my home, Cynthia, using a copied master key you weren't authorized to possess. That's a Class C felony. You've made false police reports. You've misused private surveillance drones to harass and intimidate. You think you're safe because you're wearing a cardigan and hiding behind bylaws, but you're not. You're a walking, screaming liability. The only reason you're not already in handcuffs is because I believe in giving people one final warning." She held out her hand. "Give me the drone controller." Cynthia, frozen in pure, terrified rage, slowly, reluctantly, pulled a black remote out of her oversized purse. Val took it, flicked the power switch, and declared, "Trespassing device neutralized." The next morning, the cavalry arrived. Not flashing lights, just two quiet black SUVs marked with the insignia of the State Ethics and Law Review Division. They were here for records. The lead investigator handed Val a document. "We're conducting a formal inquiry into community leadership abuse, false filings, and possible misuse of enforcement powers. We'll be issuing a notice to the HOA board later today." The board jumped ship instantly. They smelled liability, and liability wins over misplaced loyalty every time. Cynthia was suspended pending the outcome of the review. Her crown was gone, but she wasn't done being a disease. In a final, desperate, and vindictive act, she began targeting other neighbors. Marcus, the soft-spoken accountant 2 doors down, showed up pale and shaking, clutching an anonymous email that contained detailed, false accusations of tax fraud and fake spreadsheets, a coordinated cyber attack designed to ruin his business. Val didn't have to wait anymore. The community finally saw Cynthia's true face. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was weaponizing fear. Val called a meeting. Not an official HOA function, just neighbors gathering on the old boat dock. She didn't give a speech. She just told them the truth. Fact by fact. The break-in footage, the misuse of emergency keys, the false claims against Marcus. "This community doesn't need an enforcer," Val told them, standing on the steps. "It needs guardians, neighbors who protect each other, not rule each other." The silence cracked, and the change began. A petition to formally dissolve the toxic leadership structure passed by a landslide. Every remaining board member, save one good man named Todd, resigned. A new charter would be written, one with real legal oversight and rotational leadership to prevent power hoarding. But the final blow was the most satisfying. The one that made the victory permanent. A few days later, Val ran a deeper search through state community filings and found it. A new homeowners group, registered just 20 meters from us, attempting to gain legal status. Its registered agent, Cassandra R. Keene, Cynthia R. Thorne, first name shortened, middle initial added. An illegal dodge, just obvious enough for Val to catch. Val didn't press charges or go public again. She filed an immediate injunction request, not to block the group, but to review her conduct history for HOA qualification under fraud prevention protocols, using the very systems that Kerren had forced her to fortify. The State Licensing Commission issued a statewide advisory for all new neighborhood governance applicants, flagged by partial identity matches. Cynthia's new group was audited, her funding stalled. The title transfer was suspended. She wouldn't just lose her board, she'd lose the ability to ever lead one again in the entire state. Her name was entered into a shared regulatory database, permanently flagged. Her influence was deleted, not just removed, but utterly erased. That night, Val and I sat on the dock watching the moonlight reflect off the perfectly still lake. No drones, no porch complaints, no anonymous threats, just the sound of crickets. I asked her if she finally felt closure. She took a long, deep breath, letting her shoulders finally drop the armor she'd worn all week. "No," she said quietly, "but I feel clean. Like we cut something out before it spread." Val didn't stop a bully. She rewired a system that let her exist in the first place. She fixed the legal loopholes where people confuse rules for righteousness, and where authority becomes a mirror for their own insecurities. What she did wasn't loud or glamorous, but it was permanent. Months later, we got a final, unrequested court document in the mail. It was the formal denial of Cynthia Thorne's petition to regain eligibility for community leadership. It included the phrase, "Due to verified misconduct, applicants shall remain permanently barred from neighborhood authority roles under current statute." Val read it, folded it neatly, and slid it into the very back of her file drawer. No victory speech, no triumph. Just quiet, absolute peace. And that, my friends, is how a local HOA dispute became a catalyst for statewide legislative change. What about you? Have you ever had to fight someone who used petty rules as a weapon? Was the cost of peace worth the fight? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on where the line is between rules and abuse of power. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about bureaucratic battles and everyday life at Oak Haven Ridge.